Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Some guys do get into it, sure, but let's be honest. It's mostly girls who dive headfirst into making exclusive content online. That world had never interested me. I wasn't some influencer chasing likes or followers. So when my girlfriend Lena told me she'd landed a new job, OnlyFans was the last thing on my mind. Not that I'm judging, people do what they have to. But there were things about Lena's life, darker things, that I couldn't have imagined even in my worst nightmares. I remember that day vividly. It was a Wednesday morning. Lena had been job hunting ever since she quit her soul-crushing post office gig, where she slaved away 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week, for barely enough pay to cover rent. But Lena wasn't the type to settle. She had a sharp mind for computers. She'd just graduated in web development that year, and was eager to start a career in her field. Her curiosity, this relentless urge to learn, to explore, had always been her greatest strength. But this time, that same curiosity was about to lead her into serious trouble. At first, everything seemed fine. She casually mentioned she'd found a job, but said we probably wouldn't be able to hang out as much. I didn't press for details. Lena had always been a little private, and I respected that. Besides, I was swamped with exam prep and had 1,000 things swirling in my head. It was easy to get distracted. Before we left the cafe that day, Lena insisted on paying for my coffee. I offered to split the bill, but she smiled, this soft, knowing smile, and told me she wanted to treat me. It wasn't about the money. It felt good because it seemed like she was doing well, like things were finally turning around for her. That was the last time I saw her for nearly 2 weeks. Sure, I know some couples don't see each other often, but with Lena it was different. We were practically inseparable. So, that sudden gap, those silent days, felt wrong, empty, off. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to surprise her, not because I thought she was cheating or anything. I trusted her, but something wasn't right and I needed to see her. I still had a spare key to her place. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I froze. The entire apartment had changed. It wasn't her cozy little space anymore. The living room was overtaken by tripods, ring lights, scattered cameras, like a studio had exploded inside. And there, in the middle of it all, was Lena. She was wearing lingerie, layers of heavy makeup caked onto her face like a character out of a Hollywood film. Her eyes widened when she saw me. She panicked, started yelling, demanding what the hell I was doing there. I stammered out that I'd come to check on her because I was worried. We hadn't seen each other in so long. But the more I spoke, the angrier I got. Not because she was on OnlyFans, but because she had lied to me. She'd told me she'd landed a programming job, that it was eating up all her time. That was clearly a lie. At first, she tried to downplay it, saying this was just a side gig, but I knew her too well. Lena was hiding something much bigger, and that hit me harder than anything else. I could feel my pulse pounding, the heat of anger rising in my chest. But then she broke down. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she apologized over and over, swearing she'd never lie to me again. She told me there were reasons that made sense to her, but she couldn't tell me what they were. She begged me to trust her, but as I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, I noticed something. She wasn't really listening to me. Her eyes kept flicking back to her computer screen, and then she smiled. Not at me, but at someone else. A forced, unsettling smile as she started talking, softly, sweetly, to whoever was watching through the webcam. It was like I wasn't even in the room anymore. My words were background noise. That's when a pit of doubt opened up inside me. What the hell was really going on here? Frustration took over. I couldn't stand there another second. I turned to leave, muttering that I needed air, needed space. But then, bang, a sharp metallic crack against my skull. The blow was so sudden, so violent, it sent me stumbling. The room spun wildly before I collapsed to the floor. My vision blurred, but I could just make out Lena standing over me, trembling, clutching a frying pan in her hands. Tears streamed down her face as she mouthed words I couldn't hear. Darkness swallowed me, and when I woke up, everything hurt. It felt like I'd been gone for a long, long time. I had blacked out. When I came to, the first thing I felt was pain, a dull, throbbing ache at the back of my skull. I tried to move, but that's when I realized my arms and legs were tied to a chair. My heart started racing. The room was dim. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I couldn't piece together what was happening. Then I looked up, and Lena was standing there. She was walking towards me holding a large kitchen knife. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as if the knife itself weighed 100 pounds. She looked at me, not with anger, but with this deep, unbearable sorrow, like she was about to do something she'd never forgive herself for. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a muffled grunt. My mouth was taped shut. That's when the fear really hit me, a cold wave that crashed over my entire body. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was one of those life or death moments. And I had no idea why. Lena stood right in front of me now. She raised the knife. The room was so quiet I could hear the blade slicing the air. My body tensed, ready for the pain. But then she froze. Her grip loosened, her arms dropped, and she whispered, I can't do this. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked, barely holding itself together. Without warning, she ripped the tape from my mouth. I gasped for air as she knelt down, frantic. "You have to get out of here. Now. Call the police. Tell my family. They need to run." Her eyes darted around the room, wide and terrified. Then suddenly, all the lights in the house cut out, plunging us into darkness. Lena let out a scream, spinning towards the sound of static. The only remaining light was the eerie glow of her computer screen. She bolted toward it, fumbling to yank out the cables. "Lena, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Her answer changed everything. "This isn't about OnlyFans," she said, choking on her words. "I'm not working for them. I'm a hostage." My mind reeled as she spilled everything in a desperate rush. Weeks ago, while job hunting and programming, she'd gotten bored and started browsing the deep web. She'd done it before, just out of curiosity. But this time, she'd wandered too far. She had entered a private net room. What she saw in there, she wouldn't even describe. All she said was that it terrified her. After that, her computer had rebooted itself, the webcam switched on, and no matter what she did, even wiping the hard drive, she couldn't turn it off. Then came the message. It wasn't just a threat. It was personal. The message contained photos. Her little brothers leaving school, her mom arriving home from work, even images of me inside my own apartment. "They're paying me to do live shows," she said, sobbing. "But it's not like OnlyFans. It's called NoneFans. It's on the deep web. If I don't go live, they'll kill my family. They told me I had to kill you. If I don't, they'll make me watch them die." My heart dropped. The knife, the lies, the sudden distance, it all made sense, but in the worst possible way. "Lena, I won't let anything happen to you," I said, trying to sound brave. "We'll fix this. You're not alone." "I wish I could believe you," she whispered, collapsing into my arms. She hugged me tightly, crying harder than I'd ever seen her cry. She was so scared. Scared for her family, for me, for herself. Suddenly, shadows flickered against the windows. People were outside, watching, waiting. Then, like a signal had been given, the windows shattered simultaneously. Glass exploded inward. Lena clung to me, squeezing as if it was the last moment we'd ever share. Figures poured into the house, men wearing grotesque animal masks. A wolf, a stag, a boar. Their movements were deliberate, cold. One of them lunged at me. Before I could react, his fist collided with my face. I dropped to the floor, disoriented, tasting blood. The beating was brutal, relentless. My ribs felt like they were cracking with every kick. Through the chaos, I could hear Lena's screams. 2 other masked men had grabbed her, lifting her off the ground like she was nothing. She was pleading, screaming my name, begging me to protect her family. "Don't look for me, please don't try to find me." As they dragged her away, the man who'd been pummeling me finally stopped. He stood over me, breathing steadily, unaffected. Then, with a final merciless kick to my stomach, he turned and walked off as if none of this had ever mattered to him, as if I was just an object they had to silence. And then, they were gone. The house was silent. The air was still except for the glass crunching under my movements. I was alone, beaten, and in more pain than I'd ever felt. I tried to grab my phone to call the police, but it was gone. That bastard had stolen it during the attack. Desperation took over. I staggered into the street, banging on every door I could find. But the neighbors, they shut off their lights, pretended not to hear me. I was screaming like a maniac, my voice echoing into the emptiness until finally, mercifully, someone opened their door and let me use their phone. When the police arrived, they didn't believe a word of my story. For hours, I was treated like a suspect in Lena's disappearance. They thought I'd made it all up. It wasn't until they reviewed the street security cameras, saw the masked men breaking into the house, saw me being attacked, that they realized I wasn't lying. Later, Lena's family told me about a strange phone call they'd gotten the day before. She'd begged them to leave town, to run as far as they could, to not ask questions. She told them if they didn't, they'd be in grave danger. That was the last time they heard from her. They left everything behind to protect the kids. I never saw Lena again. I have no idea what became of her, but the fear never left me. The fear that those masked men might return, that they'd finish what they started. Some nights I find myself hoping they would, just so I could look into their faces and see the monsters who took her. When people hear OnlyFans, they usually think of beautiful girls posting adult content to make money. But men can upload content there too. I'm one of them. My real name is Lucas Ruiz. I'm Cuban. But on OnlyFans, people know me as just Luke. For the past year, I've been creating content on the platform, and as strange as it sounds, it's helped me pay off my student loans. I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, but it covers my bills and gives me some extra cash to enjoy life. Still, there's a downside. Being a guy on OnlyFans makes it nearly impossible to land a normal job, and dating is even worse. Most women don't want to be with a guy who posts that kind of content online. They assume things about you. That's why a while ago when I matched with a gorgeous 24-year-old girl on Tinder, I was beyond excited. We hit it off instantly, texting back and forth for weeks, and eventually made plans to meet in person. It might sound pathetic, but it was my first real date in years, and I was nervous as hell. But she wasn't just pretty. She was an aspiring artist with a wicked sense of humor. She made me laugh in ways no one had in a long time. Honestly, I was floating. I've never considered myself model material, but plenty of girls who've seen my photos, whether through OnlyFans or social media, have told me I should ditch my business degree and go full-time into modeling. I never listened. I'm just an ordinary guy trying to figure things out. We arranged to meet at this elegant riverside restaurant at 7 p.m. I knew from our chats that she was a little shy, so I decided to arrive early. Way too early, if I'm honest. I'm exaggerating when I say I got there 2 decades ahead of time, but it felt like it. I chose a quiet table tucked away at the back, one with a clear view of the river, hoping we'd have some privacy to talk and enjoy the view. I wore a fitted button-up shirt, dark jeans, and my best boots. Not too formal, but I made sure I looked presentable. I wanted to make a good impression. As the clock struck 7, I glanced around. No sign of her. 10 minutes passed, then 20. By 8:30, I was halfway through my second appetizer, nursing a couple of glasses of wine, feeling humiliated. The realization hit hard. I'd been stood up. My stomach churned with a mix of anger and disappointment. Still, I wasn't going to let the evening be a total waste. After another glass of wine and some aimless people-watching, I finally accepted defeat and went home. The next morning, I got a message from her. She apologized, explaining there'd been a family emergency and she couldn't make it. She sounded genuinely upset, and since I really liked her, I chose to believe her. We rescheduled, but, no surprise, the night before our second attempt, she canceled again. This time, her excuse was vague, something about not feeling well. I started to get this uneasy feeling. For someone who had been so eager to talk to me daily, her refusal to meet in person felt off. Still, I kept trying. I convinced myself she was just shy, that maybe she needed more time. But by the end of the second month, she vanished. Completely. No warning, no explanation. She ghosted me. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I couldn't shake the feeling that my OnlyFans work had something to do with it, that it had tainted me in her eyes. My ego took a hit, and I started questioning everything. After that, I began thinking seriously about leaving OnlyFans behind. I kept uploading content to cover expenses, but deep down, I was starting to resent the platform and everything it represented in my life. One night, after dragging myself home from a long shift, I noticed an envelope in my mailbox. I rarely get physical mail anymore, so it immediately caught my attention. There was no return address. Curious, I brought it upstairs and opened it. Inside, I found a wad of cash and a USB stick. Confused and a little wary, I plugged it into my laptop. What I saw froze me in place. The USB contained several of my OnlyFans videos. That wasn't the shocking part. What unsettled me were the other folders. One had collections of my social media photos, screenshots of my Instagram stories, and another contained candid snapshots of me in public, at the supermarket, withdrawing cash at the ATM, jogging in the park. They weren't selfies. Someone had taken these photos of me without my knowledge. But the worst was saved for last. Buried deep in one folder was an intimate photo I had sent to that girl. A private photo. One I had never posted or shared anywhere else. My skin crawled. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone was watching me. Following me. But I told myself not to overreact. Maybe it was some kind of sick prank. Calling the police felt like too much. A few days later, another envelope appeared. This time my stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I knew it was from the same sender. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Along with more cash were several photos of me inside my apartment, photos taken from outside my window. Grainy, but clear enough to see me moving around, eating, lying on the couch. Someone had been outside my place, camera in hand, close enough to capture every mundane detail of my life. A cold wave of panic washed over me. My mind raced. I lived on the first floor. My windows weren't high. It would be easy for someone to lurk outside, watching me without me ever knowing. That confirmed it. Someone was stalking me. I wanted to go to the police, but a part of me hesitated. Something inside whispered that it'd be smarter to wait, to gather more proof before making a move. So after that disturbing package, I tried to shake it off and distract myself by going back on Tinder, only to discover her account had vanished. Deleted, gone without a trace. Frustrated, I was about to toss the envelope into the trash when a small folded note slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I bent down to pick it up. It was a single line, handwritten in neat, almost elegant letters. It was finally nice to see you in person. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Until that moment, I'd convinced myself those photos were fake, some random troll playing a sick prank. But that note changed everything. Someone had seen me, up close, and I had no idea who they were. Even so, I tried to carry on with my life, acting like everything was normal, though my eyes constantly scanned my surroundings. Every glance over my shoulder, every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision sent a wave of paranoia through me. The most terrifying part? I had no clue what this person even looked like. I was being hunted by a ghost. One night after a long day, I came home late from a job interview. For once, I felt good, confident even. The interview had gone well, and I was buzzing with energy. I figured I'd celebrate by going for a night run to clear my head. I headed to the park, earbuds in, and started my usual route. But the park was almost deserted. The streetlights were sparse, and darkness pooled in the spaces between. I had to use my phone's flashlight to light my way, the beam slicing through the night but barely easing my nerves. Ever since those packages had started arriving, I couldn't shake this gnawing sense of being watched. Every rustle of leaves felt personal. After nearly an hour, I was exhausted. I jogged back to my car, unlocked it, and collapsed into the driver's seat, panting, wiping sweat from my brow. That's when it happened. A sudden, brutal pressure clamped around my neck. A rope. In a flash of terror, I realized someone was in the back seat, yanking the rope tight, trying to strangle me. My hands clawed at the noose, but it was like fighting a steel cable. The parking lot was empty, isolated. I was alone. No one was coming. Panic surged, but so did adrenaline. I thrashed, gasping, my vision dimming. I managed to choke out, "Who are you? Please let me go." My voice was a rasp, desperate. From behind me came a low, hoarse whisper, twisted with malice. "Oh, so you don't remember me? That makes you a perfect candidate for death." It was a woman's voice, cold, detached. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst. I was seconds away from blacking out. My mind screamed, "Do something." I still had my car keys in my fist. Summoning what little strength I had left, I twisted, forcing the seat's headrest back, and jabbed the keys backward, aiming blindly. I felt the sharp edge sink into something soft, and a shriek of pure agony exploded from behind me. The rope loosened instantly. I coughed violently, sucking in air, my throat ablaze with pain. Gasping, I bolted out of the car. My lungs burned, and I staggered forward, spinning around, expecting her to be right behind me. She was. And that's when I saw her face for the first time. She wasn't the young, stunning woman from Tinder. No, she was older, maybe in her 50s. Her appearance was horrifying. Greasy, tangled blonde hair framed a gaunt, hollow face. Her skin was pale, with deep purple bags under her wild eyes. She wore ripped jeans and a filthy black t-shirt. Blood oozed from her left eye, the spot where my keys had found their mark. She looked like a corpse brought back to life. But she wasn't done. She staggered after me, shrieking in rage, her hands pressed to her bleeding face. I knew I couldn't outrun her in open streets. Instead, I turned and sprinted back into the park. I knew that place like the back of my hand. If I could lose her in the shadows, I might stand a chance. I darted through the trees and found a dense patch of shrubs near the old fountain. There, crouched in the darkness, I pulled out my phone and called the police. My hands were trembling so badly it took me 3 tries to dial. I whispered to the dispatcher, explaining everything in a broken voice. They said officers were on their way. While I waited, hidden and shaking, I could hear her. "Luke, you little piece of shit. Come out and face me. I see you, you little whore." Her voice echoed through the park, venomous, feral. Every minute stretched into an eternity. Those 15 minutes were the longest, most terrifying of my life. Finally, flashing red and blue lights cut through the night. The woman didn't even try to run. She was still screaming obscenities when the officers tackled her to the ground. Watching them cuff her was surreal, like coming up for air after nearly drowning. An officer later told me they suspected her of murdering 2 other OnlyFans creators. I would have been her 3rd victim. She had been targeting both men and women, stalking them obsessively before eventually killing them. If I hadn't fought back, if that key hadn't struck her eye, I wouldn't be here telling this story. The police believed she was mentally unstable, possibly on drugs, or maybe just a pure, cold-blooded psychopath. Whatever the case, I didn't care. That night, I went straight home and deleted my OnlyFans account. Permanently. No second thoughts. I wasn't going to tempt fate again. Since then, I've kept my life simple. I now work as an assistant at a small accounting firm. The pay isn't great, but it's honest work. And more importantly, I can finally sleep at night without constantly looking over my shoulder. Peace of mind is worth more than any amount of followers. In September 2020, I was a 20-year-old university student living in Australia when I decided to open up on Reddit about something that had been haunting me. I had been too terrified to talk about it openly, but I felt like I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. It all started when I uploaded some intimate photos to OnlyFans. At first, it seemed harmless, just a way to earn some extra money. But it quickly spiraled into a nightmare. The harassment began subtly, nasty comments and invasive messages, but it didn't stop there. It escalated into something far more sinister, evolving into disturbing incidents that blurred the line between the digital world and my real life. I was petrified. So much so that I only felt safe enough to share my story through a disposable, anonymous Reddit account. I mentioned that the police were already involved and were dealing with the guy who had been tormenting me. That brought me a small sense of relief, but I made it painfully clear that they should have acted sooner. There had been red flags from the very beginning, signs that I had reported, begged them to see, but no one took me seriously until it became too dangerous to ignore. The real horror began when I returned to my parents' house after the summer holidays. I had been looking forward to it because they had just adopted a new puppy. I was excited to meet the little guy, even though I knew he'd be a handful. Puppies are cute, sure, but anyone who's had one knows they're also a chaotic mess of fur and sharp little teeth. One night, not long after I'd settled back home, I was jolted awake by the sound of the puppy whining by the back door. We were still trying to teach him to go outside for bathroom breaks, but he hadn't quite mastered it yet. Groggy and half asleep, I dragged myself out of bed, slipped on some old slippers, and padded downstairs to let him out. It was late, around 2 a.m. The house was dark, and the world outside felt eerily silent. As I stepped into the backyard, I didn't see anyone around. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow inside a car parked just beyond our driveway. My stomach twisted into a knot. Someone was there, watching me. I squinted into the darkness, but I couldn't make out their face. Every hair on my body stood on end. A shiver crawled up my spine, but I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. I quickly ushered the puppy back inside, but as I closed the door, I heard the soft, chilling rumble of an engine starting. The car's headlights didn't come on, but it began to slowly roll down the driveway, following the path I had just taken. Panic slammed into me like a wave. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I was only steps away from my home, yet I had never felt more exposed, vulnerable. I bolted the door shut, peeking through the curtains, expecting the worst. But whoever was in that car didn't try to break in. After a few tense moments, it slowly turned around and drove away into the night. I barely slept. The anxiety wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The next morning, when I finally summoned the courage to step outside, I found an envelope in my parents' mailbox. Inside was a crisp $20 Australian bill and a small piece of paper with my OnlyFans username scrawled on it. My hands were trembling. How had they found my parents' address? The thought of it made me nauseous. I racked my brain for answers, and after a lot of overthinking, a terrifying possibility surfaced. I realized it probably began when I shared my Amazon wishlist. Both OnlyFans and Amazon publicly claim their security measures protect personal information. But what they don't tell you is that third-party sellers aren't held to the same strict standards. They aren't bound by the same privacy laws. I had no proof, but it seemed the most plausible explanation. Someone could have bribed or threatened a seller to get my shipping details, or maybe they didn't even need to. Maybe it was that easy for them to just buy my information. After that, I returned to my university city, hoping to lay low and regain some sense of normalcy. I stopped uploading content. I deactivated everything, but it didn't matter. Somehow they still managed to find me. The thought that someone was so obsessed, so determined, that they would go to such lengths to stalk me. It was like a constant weight pressing down on my chest. Every time I left my apartment, I felt eyes on me. Every noise outside my window made my heart race. I lived in a state of relentless fear, always waiting for the next shadow to move. I couldn't enjoy life the way I used to anymore. Every time I picked up my phone or went online, a wave of dread would wash over me. I'd brace myself, wondering if a new threatening message was waiting for me. The constant anticipation, the fear that stalked me through every digital interaction, transformed me from a happy, carefree student into someone who was always on edge, hyper-aware, anxious, exhausted. I kept asking myself if I'd ever be able to escape this nightmare or if this was just my life now. Eventually, the fear and insecurity became too much. I decided to shut down my OnlyFans account completely. I thought that if I stepped away from that platform, maybe things would calm down. But I still wanted to share my life, to connect with people, just in a safer way. So I figured YouTube might be a better option. I convinced myself that it would give me more control over what I put out there, that it would be a fresh start. My first project was going to be a simple, lighthearted vlog, a day of shopping at a local mall, something normal, something that would help me feel like myself again. But that morning, when I got to my car, my heart dropped. It was a complete mess. Someone had broken in. The only thing missing was my vlogging camera. Nothing else had been taken. My wallet, sunglasses, even a spare phone charger were still there, untouched. I immediately blamed myself. I had used the camera the night before and lazily stashed it in the glove compartment, thinking it'd be fine. I lived in a safe neighborhood after all. I never imagined someone would target it specifically. But what sent chills down my spine was the realization that whoever did this knew exactly where to look. They hadn't rummaged through the car. They went straight for the glove compartment, as if they knew. My nerves were already frayed, but what happened next completely unraveled me. That afternoon, still shaking, I went to the security desk in my apartment building. I asked them if they could check the surveillance footage from the parking lot. They were more than willing to help, and within minutes we were reviewing the tapes. I don't know what I expected to see, maybe a random thief smashing a window and running off, but what I saw was far worse. There he was, a man, calmly and methodically destroying my car. He wasn't rushed or frantic. He didn't even glance at the other vehicles parked nearby. His focus was entirely on my car, like I was the only target in his world. After stealing my camera, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he casually strolled around the building like he was familiar with the place, like he belonged. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He stopped directly in front of my duplex. My room faced the street, and thanks to a broken set of blinds, it was partially exposed. I had a curtain, but it didn't fully cover the window. It left a gap wide enough for someone to watch. On the footage, I saw him standing there, staring through that sliver into my bedroom, watching me sleep. He stood there for over an hour. I don't know why he didn't try to break in, and honestly, I don't want to know. Maybe he was waiting for me to wake up. Maybe he was just toying with me. But thank God, for whatever reason, he didn't go further. A few days later, I found my camera at a secondhand shop just a few blocks from my apartment. The moment I saw it, my stomach twisted. I knew it was mine, but of course the SD card was missing. All those photos, those videos, they were gone. Deep down, I knew he had kept the memory card as a trophy. A sick reminder of how close he had gotten. I was completely shattered. That was the breaking point for me. I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed up and moved, desperate to put distance between myself and this nightmare. I prayed that he wouldn't follow me, that I could finally disappear from his radar. But the police never found him. They never even identified him. And that thought alone has haunted me ever since. To this day, I live with the lingering fear that he might find me again. Somewhere. Somehow. And God only knows what a deranged person like that might be capable of if he does. I'm pretty sure most of you have at least heard of OnlyFans. And if someone claims they haven't, let's be honest, they're probably lying. But just in case, here's the deal. OnlyFans is a site where people, both men and women, upload photos and videos for their subscribers, who pay a monthly fee. And yes, most of the content is on the risque side. Barely there outfits, lingerie, sometimes full-on nudity. But what's really wild is the variety of fetishes people cater to. It's not just about bodies, it can be anything. Hands, hair, feet. My name's Frederick Mers, and I used to run a pretty successful OnlyFans account. Well, technically, it wasn't mine. And what started as a brilliant idea ended up being the worst mistake of my life. It all began innocently enough, or so I thought. At first, I was just another lonely guy browsing through profiles, paying for exclusive content from girls. I'd scroll, click, pay, scroll, click, pay. But then came the day I tried to buy another subscription and realized my card was empty, maxed out. The realization hit me hard. I'd spent a ridiculous amount of money without even noticing. And that's when it hit me. This place is a freaking goldmine. But how could I cash in on it? That was the million-dollar question. I wasn't exactly model material, average looks at best, and I sure as hell didn't want to plaster my face all over the internet. I was mulling it over when my sister happened to walk by, scrolling on her phone, completely oblivious to my mental scheming. That's when a crazy idea struck me. What if I didn't need to show faces? What if I could just post feet, hands, knees, stuff that didn't require full-on identity exposure? We had similar skin tones, so in the worst case, I could use my own hands or feet for extra content. So, I did it. I created a fake account, pretending to be her, and started uploading casual shots, feet on a bedspread, hands holding coffee mugs, knees tucked under a blanket. To my absolute shock, people loved it. The account blew up almost instantly. Subscribers flooded in, throwing money at me for simple, mundane photos. No one suspected a thing. Within weeks, I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. Enough that my family started noticing. My parents were suspicious, sure, but since I was suddenly paying for groceries and buying my sister gifts, they didn't press too hard. In some twisted way, I convinced myself that what I was doing was actually helping my family, that it wasn't so bad. But of course, nothing stays perfect forever. Problems began creeping in sooner than I expected. At first, it was manageable. Strange comments, odd requests, but nothing I couldn't shrug off. Then came him. It started as an innocent message from a new user, asking for photos of my feet. Standard stuff. He paid, I sent the photos, and that was that. But then he kept messaging. At first it was harmless, but his requests slowly got weird, disturbing. He started saying things like he wanted to eat my feet, that he wanted to tear them off and keep them as trophies in his home. Creepy, sure, but I figured it was just online bravado, until the day he crossed a line. "Thanks for the photos, Frederick," he wrote. I stared at the message. My stomach dropped. Frederick, how the hell did he know my real name? He wasn't supposed to know I wasn't the girl I was pretending to be. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Without thinking, I closed every tab, logged out of the account, and started to shut everything down. But before I could even breathe, my phone buzzed. It was a WhatsApp voice message. I hit play. "Do you really think you can scam me, Frederick? I know everything about you. I know what you do. And what's worse, I know where you live. Don't worry, I'm not mad. Actually, I'm not even interested in your sister's feet. I want yours. I'm on my way to visit you." I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I bolted from my chair, racing around the house like a lunatic, locking doors, windows, every possible entry point. My sister was home, completely unaware of what was happening, and my parents weren't around. I couldn't let this psycho near them. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, my hands trembling, and sprinted to my room, locking myself inside. My head kept telling me this was just some internet freak trying to scare me, but my gut wasn't so sure. I wasn't about to take that chance. Then, another voice message came through. I played it. "I can still see you, Frederick. I'm getting closer. How about we make this a little more interesting? Turn off your webcam, let's see how long you can hide." That was the moment when sheer terror settled in. The moment I heard that message, my heart sank. That bastard had been spying on me. He wasn't just some deranged fan. He was a hacker. Panic surged through me as I lunged at my computer and yanked the webcam cable out. But just as I did, a loud knock echoed through the house. "Camilla, don't open the door," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. I bolted down the stairs, skipping steps, but it was too late. My sister had already turned the knob. To my immense relief, it wasn't the stalker. It was just Camilla's boyfriend. He strolled in casually, unaware of the sheer terror pulsing through my veins. As soon as they stepped inside, I slammed the door shut and double-locked it, my hands still trembling. His presence gave me a sliver of comfort. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who looked like he could handle himself in a fight. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. I retreated back to my room, trying to convince myself everything was okay now. The house felt safer with him there. The absence of any new messages gave me hope that maybe the guy had just been bluffing. A scare tactic. So I did what any idiot would do. I turned on Netflix, attempting to drown out the paranoia. I wanted so desperately to believe it was over. But then I heard it. The soft creak of my bedroom door slowly opening. I spun around, heart thundering. It was Camilla and her boyfriend. "Hey guys, what's up?" I asked, forcing a smile, desperate to keep things light. But before I could even finish my sentence, he was behind me. His arm clamped around my chest as his hand slapped over my mouth, silencing me instantly. I struggled, but it was useless. Camilla approached, holding her phone up to her boyfriend's mouth. He leaned in and recorded a voice message that made my blood freeze solid. "I told you I was coming for you, little Frederick." The moment he hit send, my phone buzzed. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was him, the stalker's voice. But it wasn't some distant stranger. It was right here, in the same room, with his hand gripping my face. That's when it hit me. Camilla knew. They both knew. This wasn't some deranged fan teaching me a lesson. This was personal. "Identity theft, Frederick." "That's not very nice," Camilla said softly, crouching down so her face was level with mine. Her tone was calm, but her eyes, they were cold, surgical. "You thought those little gifts would make me look the other way, that you could sell my body without consequences?" Her hand slid down, gripping my foot with a calculated gentleness that made my skin crawl. "I don't think I can go through with this," Edward, her boyfriend, muttered, though his grip didn't loosen. "I told you," Camilla said, her smile unwavering. "I'd take his feet. You think I was lying?" That's when I felt it, the chilling touch of metal near my toes. My heart pounded so violently I thought it would give out. Was she seriously going to? "You see, Fred?" Camilla whispered. "I'm not the one who's obsessed with feet. But there are people out there, deep web people, who are. And guess what? They want yours." She looked up at Edward, who hesitated, but then slowly he nodded. "You're not the only one willing to bend the rules for money," she added, voice razor sharp. "Difference is, you're still playing in the kiddie pool." Then she started cutting. The blade sank into my skin with agonizing slowness. The pain was surreal, each movement deliberate, methodical, like she wanted me to feel every nerve ignite. Blood oozed down, staining the floor, but she didn't rush. She enjoyed it. I tried to scream, but Edward's hand was still clamped over my mouth. My body thrashed, but with every surge of pain, my strength drained away. It was like being trapped in a living nightmare, one that just wouldn't end. I wondered if they'd ever stop. Would I survive this? The world started to blur, the room spinning as the agony took over. I felt myself slipping away, bit by bit, until everything faded to black. When I came to, I was in my bed. The sunlight bleeding through the curtains felt surreal, almost mocking. Standing over me were Camilla and Edward, their faces calm, even cheerful. "Hey, you're finally awake," Edward said with a grin. "You're looking a lot better." I jerked up, gasping, and ripped the sheet away. My feet, still there, were wrapped tightly in thick white bandages. The relief was short-lived. My feet were intact, but the scars, both physical and mental, would be permanent. They hadn't cut them off, but they had made damn sure I'd never forget. Camilla sat beside me, her expression soft, almost maternal. "Relax, Fred. You'll be fine. You have to understand, we did this out of necessity, so you'd never dare to do something like that again." Her words were honeyed poison. "This was for pretending to be me," she added, her eyes locking onto mine. "For stealing my images without consent." From that day on, I tried to rebuild my life. I dove into my studies, worked odd jobs, saved every penny with the single goal of getting away from her. My parents noticed the bandages, of course. They asked questions. But Camilla had an answer ready. "He's so clumsy," she said, laughing it off. "He got his feet stuck in a cave where some wild animals live. Luckily, it's just a few small scratches." They bought it. I didn't correct her. I couldn't. From that moment on, I lived under a constant cloud of fear. Every glance, every shadow felt like a threat. I know what I did was wrong. I deserved to be called out. But nothing could justify the nightmare I endured. Now, I just hope to find peace. Though deep down, I fear that peace is something I lost the moment I uploaded that first photo. Maybe forever. I never imagined my life would spiral into such darkness, all because of what started as a simple, innocent idea to earn some extra cash. It all began when I decided to open an OnlyFans account. Yes, I know how that sounds. Controversial, maybe even reckless. But at the time, I was drowning. My day job barely covered the bills, and when a friend half-jokingly suggested I try my luck on the platform, desperation made the idea seem reasonable. At first, it was awkward, uncomfortable even. I second-guessed every picture I took, every video I posted. But slowly, I began to loosen up. It became easier with time, almost mechanical. I uploaded content, interacted with subscribers, and surprisingly, it didn't feel as demeaning as I had feared. Sure, society had its harsh judgments, and part of me had internalized that stigma. But the truth? It was just digital content. No physical contact, no real-world encounters. Just me, a screen, and faceless usernames. It seemed like a harmless way to make ends meet. Everything was going smoothly, until he appeared. At first, I didn't recognize him. On OnlyFans, he went by the name Carlos. His profile photo was generic, his bio unremarkable. But his messages were different from the usual ones I got. He was polite, respectful. His comments were flattering without being crude. I found myself looking forward to his messages because he wasn't like the others, who only saw me as a fantasy. Carlos seemed genuinely interested in me, or so I thought. As weeks passed, our conversations became more frequent, more personal. We started chatting outside of the platform, Instagram, then WhatsApp. He would tell me about his life, his family, his struggles. I reciprocated, though I was careful. I never talked about my past. I couldn't. The memories of my abusive relationship were wounds that hadn't fully closed, scars that throbbed beneath the surface. But Carlos, he knew exactly which strings to pull. His kindness felt like a balm, a contrast to the trauma I had endured. One evening, Carlos suggested we meet in person. He said he lived in another city but would travel just to see me. The idea made me uneasy. My guard shot up immediately. I had always been cautious about crossing that line. But he was persistent. His messages grew more insistent, yet always cloaked in flattery. And stupidly, I was flattered. After all, we had been talking for months. He had never given me a reason to distrust him. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him, but only in a public place, a cafe in the middle of downtown where I'd feel safe. The day of the meeting, I remember feeling a tight knot in my stomach as I walked through the cafe door, a mix of nervous excitement and apprehension. But the moment my eyes scanned the room, my heart plummeted. It wasn't Carlos, it was him. Vincent, my ex. The man who had shattered me, body and soul. The man whose hands had left bruises not just on my skin but on my mind. He was sitting there, smiling as if we were old friends catching up. My knees locked. I couldn't move. My breath hitched. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice drenched in false sweetness. Panic surged through me. I tried to back away to flee, but he was faster. His hand clamped around my arm, vice-like. "Don't go," he murmured, his tone gentle but laced with venom. "We're supposed to meet, aren't we?" I froze. His grip was a silent warning, his smile a mask for the threat simmering beneath. He guided me back into the chair, his presence suffocating. As he sat across from me, his words became a barrage, reminders of the past I had desperately tried to bury. He recounted memories I had spent years trying to erase, each sentence like a blade reopening old wounds. And then, as casually as someone commenting on the weather, he dropped the bomb. Vincent told me he had been following me ever since I left him, that he knew everything, where I worked, where I lived, and, most chillingly, about my OnlyFans account. He said it with a smirk, watching my face for a reaction, feeding off my fear. My world tilted. The illusion of safety I had built came crashing down. I realized, with a sickening twist in my gut, that Vincent had subscribed to my profile solely to worm his way back into my life. He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear, and sneered. "See? I told you you'd never be anything but a whore." That hit me like a punch straight to the stomach. The words were a grim echo of every drunken night he had come home, slurring insults before his fists followed. I had fought so hard to silence those memories, but here they were again, alive and suffocating. After a few minutes of his twisted monologue, he dropped his voice and said he wanted to go somewhere more private. I immediately refused, shaking my head, trying to stay composed, but his smile didn't falter. With a fluid motion, he revealed a small gun, barely concealed under his jacket. "I don't want to cause a scene here," he murmured, his tone detached, almost bored, but it chilled me to the bone. My blood froze. There was no room for negotiation. I felt the cold barrel nudge against my ribs as he gripped my arm and led me toward the exit. I glanced around, trying to lock eyes with someone, anyone, to signal for help. But the cafe buzzed with indifferent conversations, clinking cutlery, and people too engrossed in their own lives to notice mine unraveling. I hated myself for being this naive, for agreeing to meet, for not seeing through his mask sooner. I knew what Vincent was capable of, yet I let myself believe he was gone from my life. He took me to an apartment not far from the cafe, a place I realized he had rented solely for this encounter. The moment the door shut behind us, the air shifted. The walls seemed to close in as I tried to stay calm, to think, to find an exit in my mind before finding it with my feet. But he was always a step ahead. He shoved me against the wall, his hands gripping my shoulders with bruising force. Then came the words, the vile, dehumanizing words he used to strip me of any sense of self-worth. Words I don't even want to remember, let alone repeat. I tried reasoning with him, appealing to whatever shred of humanity he had left, but it only fueled his rage. His face twisted with fury as he pulled out the gun and pressed it against my forehead. "If you can't be mine, you won't be anyone's," he hissed. And then, he pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. For a second, the world stood still. Vincent stared at the gun in disbelief. He pulled the trigger again. Another empty click. That was the moment something primal surged within me, a survival instinct that overpowered the fear. Without thinking, I drove my knee up into his groin with every ounce of strength I had. He doubled over with a grunt, the gun clattering to the floor. I didn't wait. I bolted for the door, adrenaline surging through me as he lunged to grab me. I felt his fingers graze my arm, but I wrenched free and flung the door open. I ran. I ran like my life depended on it, because it did. I didn't look back as I sprinted down the staircase, barefoot, abandoning my high heels that betrayed me on every step. Behind me, his enraged screams echoed through the stairwell, but I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down until I burst onto the street, breathless and frantic. I spotted a couple walking by and rushed to them, gasping out a plea to call the police. They stared at me, startled, but the urgency in my voice broke through. By the time the cops arrived, Vincent was gone. The apartment was empty, scrubbed of any trace of him. It was as if he had never been there. Still, I gave my statement. I told them everything, every horrifying detail. Deep down, I hoped justice would catch up with him. But in the end, it was all for nothing. They arrested him for a few days. Then he was back out. There's not enough evidence, they said. He's got a powerful lawyer, they said. As if I didn't know. Vincent had money, connections, and the smirk of a man who knew the system was his playground. The police told me to be careful, to change my routines, to stay off social media as much as possible. But how could I? OnlyFans was my livelihood, and besides, Vincent already knew everything. Where I lived, what I did, who I was. Since that day, I've lived in a constant state of fear. I changed cities, switched my phone number, even changed my name on social media. But it's never enough. Sometimes when I'm alone, I feel eyes on me, like he's there, lurking, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I try to move on. I really do. But that experience left scars deeper than any bruise. Now, I know better. I know danger doesn't always announce itself with snarls and threats. Sometimes it wears a smile and leaves flattering comments on your photos. Sometimes it comes from the internet, wrapped in kindness, hiding a monster beneath. Melissa Rojas, a 33-year-old Instagram influencer and freelance model from Richmond, Texas, lived a life that seemed straight out of a dream, or at least, that's how it looked on social media. With over 2 million followers across her platforms, Melissa, better known by her online persona Luna Bell, had built an empire of sponsorships and brand collaborations, raking in a comfortable six-figure income. Her follower list read like a who's who of the entertainment world: Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Snoop Dogg, Meek Mill. She wasn't just an influencer, she was an icon. By August 2020, like many in her industry, Melissa had tapped into the rising phenomenon of OnlyFans. It offered her a more personal connection with her audience, plus an even larger financial opportunity. But while her fans celebrated her openness, her father, Roberto, saw it differently. To him, the constant spotlight on his daughter's life was a ticking time bomb. We always kept her identity a secret. Even her closest friends knew her only as Luna. Roberto had shared in an interview months earlier, his voice laced with anxiety. For safety reasons, I've had to move her 3 times already. It was my paranoia maybe, but having millions of strangers following her every move. It scared me. Some of them didn't just admire her, they were obsessed. That kind of attention isn't healthy. On Sunday, August 29, 2020, around 4:00 p.m., that parental fear turned into gut-wrenching panic. Roberto hadn't heard from Melissa in nearly 48 hours, an unsettling silence that was completely out of character for his daughter. Uneasy, he drove straight to her apartment in Cortland, each mile amplifying his worst fears. He knocked at her door, gently at first, then with urgency. No answer. He pulled out his phone, dialing her number, straining his ears to catch the faintest ring. His heart skipped when he thought he heard the subtle vibration of her phone from somewhere inside. But no footsteps, no voice. Then, there it was. A noise. Soft, almost deliberate movement from within. But no one had answered the door. A cold shiver ran down Roberto's back. His instincts screamed that something was off, horribly off. Without a second thought, adrenaline surging, he took a few steps back and rammed his shoulder into the door. The bolt snapped under the impact. The door swung open with a loud, hollow echo. What he saw inside crushed him. Melissa was lying motionless at the bottom of the staircase, Her body twisted unnaturally. His breath caught in his throat. "Mija," he whispered, but his voice was swallowed by the eerie silence. The apartment was in shambles. Furniture overturned, shelves emptied, and the walls, they were smeared with red lipstick graffiti, frantic scrawled messages that seemed more like threats than art. As he staggered forward, his eyes tried to make sense of the words, but before he could read them, a sudden thud from upstairs snapped him back into survival mode. For a fleeting moment, a part of him hoped, desperately, that Melissa had fallen by accident, that maybe she was still alive, unconscious. But the noise upstairs, it wasn't her. Fueled by sheer panic, Roberto bolted up the staircase, taking 2 steps at a time. What he found at the top turned his blood to ice. A man lay sprawled on the floor, gasping and choking, his body convulsing violently. Blood pooled around him, spreading like ink on paper. A large, serrated knife was embedded deep in his throat, the handle still quivering. His eyes, wide and glassy, locked with Roberto's, but they were quickly dimming. "Who are you? What did you do?" Roberto shouted, his voice cracking with rage and disbelief. But the man was beyond words. He gurgled, trying to speak, but only blood bubbled out. Within seconds, his body stilled. Roberto stood there, panting, numb, surrounded by chaos, the reality of what had happened crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He was too late. The man took his last breath just as Roberto entered the room, his body collapsing into stillness. Despite the overwhelming horror of the scene, the haunting questions that flooded Roberto's mind wouldn't torment him for long. His instincts kicked in. He called 911 with shaking hands, forcing himself to stay composed. But once the call ended, his eyes were drawn back to the chaotic scrawls of red lipstick smeared across the apartment walls. "I was used for money," one message read, the letters uneven, pressed deep into the paint as if carved with anger. "I should have stayed in Florida," said another, a bitter regret dripping from every letter. But it was the last line that truly froze Roberto's blood. "I wish I had never loved her. I feel sorry for the owner and the family." His knees nearly buckled. Those words weren't just vandalism. They were a confession, a final chilling testament to a mind consumed by obsession. His worst nightmare had manifested in the most grotesque way imaginable. In the days that followed, the truth unraveled in devastating fragments. Melissa's killer was identified as Kevin Aorto, a 34-year-old man from Florida. A seemingly ordinary individual with no criminal record, no prior arrests. Just an average man whose fixation on Melissa had festered into something monstrous. His obsession grew so consuming that he tracked her down, invaded her sanctuary, took her life, and, in a grotesque finale, took his own. Investigators dug into his background, searching for any trace of prior mental health issues, but nothing surfaced immediately. He had slipped through every safety net. "I have no idea how he found her," Roberto said, his voice raw with frustration and helplessness. "I did everything I could to protect her. She didn't even tell her closest friends where she lived. We made sure of that." Despite their precautions, the horrifying fact remained. Kevin had found her. No one knew when or how he had arrived in Texas. His sudden appearance was a mystery that deepened with every new piece of information the authorities unearthed. News of Melissa's murder spread like wildfire, setting social media ablaze. Among the many who mourned her loss was Canadian rapper Tory Lanez, who posted a heartfelt tribute, "Rest in peace, Queen." But as the flood of condolences poured in, few touched on the dark reality of her death. Most celebrated her beauty, her success, her influence, but skirted the terrifying circumstances that ended her life. She was extremely cautious, Melissa's mother Janetta said through tears. She didn't trust easily. But still, someone managed to find her, stalk her, and kill her. It's shocking, it's disgusting to think a man like Kevin Aorto, with his sick obsession, could track down such an innocent young woman and take her from us. Her words only underscored Roberto's deepest fear, His relentless concern hadn't been paranoia after all. He had been right to worry, but even his best efforts had proven no match against Kevin's twisted determination. What disturbed investigators and family alike was the simplicity of Kevin's methods. He wasn't a hacker or a cyber genius. He was just a man with an unhealthy fixation. The fact that someone with no advanced computer skills could discover Melissa's address raised glaring questions about privacy vulnerabilities. Some speculated Kevin may have obtained Melissa's billing information through data leaks or account breaches, exposing her real name and address, an alarming possibility that cast a harsh spotlight on platforms like OnlyFans and their responsibility to safeguard their creators' identities. The tragedy sparked a much-needed conversation about the perils of internet fame. In a world that glorifies visibility, the incident served as a grim reminder that the brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadows that lurk behind it. For all the glamour and financial freedom that a public online life might offer, the hidden costs, privacy invasion, stalking, and worse, are often ignored until it's too late. Melissa's story became a brutal warning. Sometimes the price of shining online is far steeper than anyone is willing to pay. In the vast, unpredictable world of OnlyFans, where desire often blurs the edges of logic and intimacy hides in shadowed corners, connections can sometimes run deeper than we're prepared for. That's where Samantha and Javier found each other, two souls who couldn't have been more different, yet were drawn together by an invisible thread. Samantha, a strikingly beautiful girl with a restless, adventurous heart, was always chasing new experiences. The moment Javier sent her his first message, something about his words, witty, playful, and laced with charm, made her pause. Javier had that rare spark, a mix of charisma and humor that pulled her in and didn't let go. Their chats quickly turned into late-night conversations, filled with laughter that felt real and spontaneous, as if they weren't just words on a screen. On OnlyFans, where the line between private and public life is a fragile one, their bond deepened in ways neither expected. Samantha shared her art with Javier, pieces of herself expressed through colors and shapes, and he responded not just with compliments, but with genuine admiration and sharp, clever jokes that made her laugh until her stomach hurt. They dreamed together, made promises about a future that seemed both distant and vividly close, as if it was just waiting for them to reach out and grab it. As the weeks passed, their connection grew roots. What had started as playful banter turned into something richer, something more sincere. The virtual world wasn't enough anymore. They needed to meet, to see if the magic was real. So, with her heart pounding against her ribs, Samantha booked a flight to Javier's city. The anticipation was electric, a cocktail of excitement and nerves she couldn't shake off. When they finally met, it was like stepping into a scene from a fairy tale. Their eyes locked, and the chemistry that had simmered through their screens exploded into real life. Hand in hand, they wandered through the bustling streets of New York, their laughter blending with the city's endless hum. "I can't believe we actually met on OnlyFans," Samantha said, her laughter bright and carefree, lighting up her face like neon lights in Times Square. "Who would have thought, right?" Javier grinned, squeezing her hand gently, his laugh full of triumph as if he'd just hit the jackpot. Their days unfolded like a perfect montage. Long walks, shared meals, stolen kisses on crowded sidewalks. But fairy tales, Samantha would soon learn, have shadows too. As time trickled by, subtle cracks began to appear. The spark in Javier's eyes dimmed when he looked at her, replaced by a distracted glaze as he buried himself in his phone. Conversations became shorter, smiles more mechanical. Samantha felt the shift like a slow, tightening knot in her stomach. One evening, as they sat across from each other in a dimly lit cafe, the glow of the candle between them couldn't mask the growing coldness. "Javier," she said, her voice soft but edged with unease, "are you okay? You've been distant lately." He froze, a flicker of guilt flashing across his face before he sighed and looked away. "It's nothing, love. Just work stress." That's all. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But a tiny, persistent doubt kept scratching at the back of her mind. The truth, however, had a way of finding its moment. Later that night, as Javier stepped into the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A flicker of hesitation, and then curiosity got the better of her. What she saw turned her blood cold. Message after message. Sweet nothings whispered to other girls. Promises of love. Words he had never spoken to her. Her fingers trembled as disbelief gave way to searing betrayal. Without thinking, she flung the phone aside and confronted him as soon as he emerged, towel slung casually over his shoulder. "How could you do this, Javier?" Her voice cracked, caught between shock and fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Javier's eyes widened, but the guilt was already etched on his face. This wasn't just about her. He had been weaving a web of lies, playing with hearts as if they were toys. Samantha, please, it's not what you think," he stammered. But the words rang hollow in the charged air. "Not what I think?" She shot back, her voice rising, sharp as a blade. "You've been stringing along other girls while telling me fairy tales. How could you betray me like that?" Tears welled up, spilling over as her anger morphed into raw, aching hurt. The cafe, their walks, their laughter, it all felt like a cruel joke now. "I'm sorry. Really, I am," Javier whispered, but his eyes couldn't meet hers. He stood there, cornered, a man watching the walls of his lies collapse around him. The silence that followed was suffocating. The space between them, once so effortlessly intimate, now stretched into an ocean of disappointment. Their relationship was now hanging by a delicate thread, fraying with each passing moment as Samantha grappled with the suffocating weight of betrayal. The platform where they had first connected, a place that once symbolized excitement and discovery, had become a bitter reminder of how fleeting and fragile trust could be. Days bled into weeks, and though the wound in her heart refused to close, Samantha, with a quiet resilience, began to rebuild herself. She shed the chains of Javier's lies, piece by piece, determined not to let deceit define her story. What was once a tale of romance became a hard-earned lesson, a sobering reminder that in the digital age, not all connections are as genuine as they seem. Meanwhile, Javier, consumed by the wreckage of his own making, spiraled into a pit of regret. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly, and the emptiness left by Samantha's absence grew into an all-consuming void. He reached out, sending message after message, his words dripping with apologies and hollow promises of change. But Samantha had learned to see through his facade. His words were echoes, faint, meaningless, and unable to reach her anymore. One night, driven by a desperate need to turn back time, Javier returned to the place where their story had begun. The screen, the platform, the chat window, all of it stared back at him, empty and cold. He had hoped, foolishly, that somehow Samantha would be there, that the past could be rewritten. But only silence greeted him. Memories flooded his mind, wrapping him in a suffocating blanket of nostalgia and regret. The laughter, the promises, the fleeting moments of sincerity, all twisted now into sharp reminders of what he had destroyed. In a moment of reckless despair, blinded by the belief that life without Samantha was meaningless, Javier made a tragic, irreversible decision. Alone, engulfed by his own darkness, he left behind a note, a whisper of his sorrow, filled with regret, asking questions that would never find answers. Could she ever forgive him? Did he even deserve it? The following morning, Samantha received the devastating news. Her heart, still tender from betrayal, shattered once again. But this time, it didn't break for Javier. It broke for a life that had been lost to selfishness and emotional recklessness. The pain was sharp, yet hollow, a cruel twist of fate that forced her to mourn not only his death but also the entire chain of choices that led to it. A heavy, unwelcome guilt settled on her shoulders, even though she knew deep down that it wasn't hers to bear. Through the haze of her tears, Samantha realized a harsh truth. Human connections, in their rawest form, hold the power to be both breathtakingly beautiful and destructively cruel. A simple promise made in the wrong hands could become a weapon, dragging innocent souls into the depths of emotional ruin. In a moment of somber reflection, Samantha resolved to channel her grief into something meaningful. Her next art exhibition would be a tribute, not just to Javier, but to the delicate, often perilous dance between connection and deception in the digital world. Each canvas would become a testament to the fragile line between love and manipulation, light and shadow. As she painted, every brushstroke carried a deeper message. Her works depicted the intoxicating allure of online intimacy, intertwined with the lurking dangers that come when sincerity is replaced with illusion. It wasn't just an exhibition, it was a warning, a mirror held up to a society that often mistakes curated profiles for authenticity. Through her art, Samantha invited others to confront their own digital reflections, to question the stories they tell and the stories they choose to believe. She exposed the dark market where virtual fantasies overshadow reality, urging people to protect their vulnerabilities in a world eager to exploit them. In her pain, Samantha found a purpose. Her personal tragedy became a lighthouse, casting its beam into the murky waters of online relationships, guiding others towards authenticity amidst a sea of facades.